The Collapse of 38 Years. Anatomy of a Power Ambush. You won't believe how fast 38 years of power can collapse. It's a study in political physics. The greater the altitude, the more devastating the fall. In that hushed, marble-columned committee room, Nancy Pelosi stood at her committee table, not as a witness, but as a seasoned general surveying a battlefield she had already preordained as a victory. At 84 years old, she didn't just walk into a room, she commanded it, possessing the kind of institutional presence that only decades of ruthless power wielding in the highest chambers of American government can bestow. Her armor was a designer Armani suit, silk that shimmered with every calculated movement, its tailoring pristine, a garment that likely cost more than a state teacher's salary for 2 months. It was a projection of authority, of being perpetually above the fray. Behind her, 12 meticulously arrayed aides formed a silent, organized royal court, ready to dispense documents, whisper urgent advice, or simply provide the visual density of political importance. When her fingers stabbed through the air toward her opponent, and she spoke, her voice was sharp, amplified by the scattered microphones. You're a backwoods relic from Louisiana who doesn't understand modern governance. The committee room detonated. Democrats leapt to their feet. The sound of applause and desk banging a deliberate sonic weapon. In the packed gallery, 500 supporters, who had come specifically to witness their champion execute another conservative senator, waved signs and launched into a rhythmic, deafening chant. Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. The sound echoed off the marble and vaulted ceilings, successfully turning a solemn congressional hearing room into a frenzied campaign rally, where facts were secondary to collective emotional energy. Across the chasm of the witness table sat Senator John Kennedy. He was alone. He calmly set down his pen, his single, closed manila folder his only visible companion. No staff flanked him, no entourage waited, there was no theatrical show planned. Just one senator from Louisiana in a slightly rumpled suit that had clearly seen too many flights and too many long days. His wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the harsh overhead lights as he reached for his water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. The contrast was magnificent, almost a theatrical masterpiece in its simplicity, her fury versus his calm, her crowd versus his solitude, her designer armor versus his working man's clothes. It was the ultimate visual metaphor for the coastal elite versus the country populist. Pelosi's contemptuous smile widened. This would be easy. She had choreographed, executed, and won 1,000 of these confrontations and had no expectation of failure now. She launched into her prepared remarks, her voice gaining momentum with each accusation, feeding off the energy radiating from her gallery. An aide rushed forward with a statistical chart, and Pelosi held it up like a prosecutor presenting the single, most damning piece of evidence. You represent poverty, she proclaimed. You represent ignorance. Louisiana ranks 48th in education, 49th in healthcare, dead last in infrastructure. The supporters roared their approval. The rhythmic chant became a relentless, pounding drumbeat. Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. While California leads, Pelosi continued, spreading her arms wide in a proprietary gesture that seemed to embrace the entire Golden State. Louisiana follows like a puppy, begging for scraps. She paused, accepting the calculated laughter, then pressed the attack. Your state takes more federal money than it gives. California subsidizes your failure. Democrats climbed onto their chairs, cheering wildly. The noise was near painful, a wall of sound designed to intimidate and silence. Through this orchestrated chaos, Kennedy remained a fortress of stillness. His head stayed down, his pen moved steadily across the paper in front of him. That careful, methodical script never wavering. He refused to look up, refused to react, refused to grant her the emotional engagement she craved. He wouldn't give her the choreographed confrontation she had scripted for the cameras. Pelosi's smile faltered. She needed a reaction, some flicker of anger or retreat, a sign that her blows were landing. His refusal to engage made her look desperate, her relentless attacks appearing unearned and shrill. Her voice grew louder, faster, the attacks becoming more personal. Are you even listening to me, Senator? She demanded, frustration sharpening her tone. Or is this too complex for Louisiana education to understand? The crowd, sensing her frustration, chanted louder, as if volume alone could compel him to break. Kennedy merely kept writing, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. His Louisiana calm maddeningly impenetrable. Her carefully constructed performance was beginning to crack under the weight of his passive defiance. She read faster, listing the titans of her district: Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla, companies worth more than entire countries. We create the future while you drill oil and cling to the past. She shouted, the accusation a final flourish of cultural contempt. Then, after what felt like an eternity of the one-sided assault, Kennedy moved. The motion was slow, deliberate, a geological event compared to Pelosi's frenzy. He set down his pen. The small sound caught the room's attention. The noise level dropped instantly to whispers. People in the gallery leaned in, straining. Kennedy removed his wire-rimmed glasses with theatrical precision. Taking his time, he pulled his handkerchief and cleaned each lens with a maddening, deliberate care, as if the only important task in the world was removing a speck of dust. And Pelosi's half-hour of fury was merely background noise to be tuned out. His simple ritual became a profound political statement. I have all the time in the world. And you are rushing to your own ruin. He replaced his glasses, looked up for the first time, and met her eyes directly. The contact was ice cold. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, forcing the entire room, the gallery, the press, the committee, to strain and lean in to hear him. Congresswoman Pelosi, he said, each word measured, deliberate. I did listen very carefully. His hand moved to the manila folder, a single finger pushing it open with gentle pressure. The sound of paper sliding on wood seemed to mark the end of one era and the commencement of the next. I heard a lot about California's greatness. Kennedy continued in that same quiet voice. About Silicon Valley. About innovation. About your district being the economic engine of America. He reached into the folder and pulled out an 8x10 photograph. He held it up high, ensuring every camera and every eye could register the image. The photograph showed a sprawling homeless encampment covering what had once been a sidewalk. Tents made of cardboard and tarps stretched in both directions. Trash littered the street, and in the immediate foreground, a human figure squatted against a wall, defecating in broad daylight while seemingly oblivious pedestrians walked past. This is your district, ma'am, Kennedy said, his voice still quiet, still calm, yet now carrying the weight of a moral indictment. You're California. This photograph was taken yesterday morning. Market Street, San Francisco. The gallery gasped, a sharp, collective intake of breath from 500 people. Press cameras clicked frantically, their shutters documenting both the horrific image and Pelosi's immediate, catastrophic reaction. Her smile froze on her face like someone had paused a video mid-frame. For a fraction of a second, she seemed to forget how to move, how to react, how to maintain the carefully constructed image she had projected for 30 minutes. Her economic engine was a humanitarian sewer. That's taken out of context. She stammered, her voice coming out higher. Defensive, the shift in power instantly audible. You can't just show one image. And is it? Kennedy asked, tilting his head slightly. I have 50 more photographs just like this one. Would you like me to show them? Shall we discuss context, Congresswoman? His other hand emerged from under the table, holding a thick stack of photos. He dropped them onto his table with a heavy, final thud that echoed through the now quiet chamber. The sound punctuated the moment. The initial phase of Pelosi's public humiliation was complete. Her control was gone. The moral high ground, which she had so brazenly claimed, was now demonstrably covered in filth. The $38 million whisper, the shock of systematic wealth. Pelosi straightened up, fighting desperately to reclaim her vertical authority and the crumbling control of her room that was slipping away with every passing second. Her voice, though initially stammering, strengthened, retreating to the safety of her prepared narrative. My district is the economic engine of America, she proclaimed, listing the corporate giants again: Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla. The invocation of these names was meant to conjure an economic shield, deflecting the ugliness of the street photo. We create the future, she declared, attempting to recapture the lost momentum. Her aides, recognizing the dire situation, scrambled around her, 3 people moving at once. A flurry of rustling papers and urgent, barely audible whispers. They were trying to rebuild the wall of competence that Kennedy's single photograph had breached. Kennedy simply let her finish. He watched, patient, like a predator who knows its prey is trapped. He had all day, and her furious defense was merely the necessary prelude to the real reckoning. When she finally paused for breath, having run out of corporate names to invoke, he spoke again. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly, "you certainly profit from the future." He slid a document across his table toward her, the paper making a soft whisper against the polished wood, even from the back rows of the gallery. The sheer scale of the numbers on the document was legible, millions. Written in bold, unblinking type. "My investments are legal," Pelosi's voice interjected, defensive now, not attacking. The shift in her tone, from the aggressor prosecuting his state to the defendant protecting her wealth, was unmistakable. They both knew the power dynamic had fundamentally inverted. Kennedy nodded slowly, letting 5 full seconds of agonizing silence build. Nobody moved. The moment stretched out, heavy and suffocating. "Legal," he finally said, his voice laced with casual dismissal. "Absolutely legal, Congresswoman." Another pause, longer this time. A chasm yawning opened between legality and morality. "But are they ethical?" Before she could formulate a response, Kennedy reached under his table. The laptop scraped against the silence. He opened it with deliberate, agonizing slowness, every eye in the room fixated on his hands. The computer seemed to take an eternity to boot up, the manufactured delay amplifying the tension. He typed, waited, the screen reflecting in his glasses. Behind him, the large projection screen flickered to life. The first visual of the financial dissection appeared. 3 simple lines that served as the initial blast radius of the revelation. Paul Pelosi stock trades. January 2025. $38.000. The room exploded. Gasps transformed into shouts, turning into the harsh scrape of chairs as people stood for a better view. The collective shock that escaped the financial reporters in the press row was not polite surprise, but genuine, unprofessional horror. $38 million. In 1 month. Pelosi's hands slammed onto her podium. But it wasn't an action of anger, it was a visceral reflex. Catching herself, attempting to maintain some semblance of physical composure. Her face visibly drained of color, transforming in mere seconds from the flushed red of exertion to the shock white of total exposure. Her aides rushed forward, only to be waved away by a visibly shaking hand that betrayed the true, catastrophic impact of that number. Kennedy's voice sliced through the ensuing chaos. Still quiet, still calm, still forcing people to stop shouting so they could lean in and hear the final, damning context. "Your husband made more in 1 month. Ma'am," he said, letting the words sink, letting that number burn itself into every mind, "than most Americans make in their entire lifetimes." The screen instantly changed to show a detailed timeline, the entries appearing with rhythmic, sickening regularity. January 7th. $5.000 Apple stock sale. January 14th. $7.000 Nvidia call options. January 21st. $10.000 Google purchase. January 28th. $16.000 various trades. Kennedy let each number sit, letting the cumulative effect sink in. This was not a lucky trade, this was a systematic, massive accumulation of wealth. And it all started, Kennedy said, his eyes never leaving hers, with information you had access to. Pelosi stood frozen, her jaw working up and down like a fish pulled from the water. Desperately gasping but unable to form words. Democrats on the committee shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact, suddenly engrossed in their notes. The financial analysis had reached a critical mass, turning from an intellectual disagreement into a moral indictment. Kennedy leaned forward, the distance between them closing to nothing. "Shall we discuss how legal corruption works, Congresswoman?" The screen faded to black. Then, in stark white letters filling the entire display, a new chart appeared, designed to obliterate any remaining defense. It showed 2 lines climbing upward from 2014 to the present. But one line, Pelosi's investment portfolio, climbed at an angle so steep it looked almost vertical compared to the overall market. Kennedy's voice remained steady, the casual Louisiana draw somehow making the numbers even more damning. Her investment portfolio, he said, beat the overall stock market by 4 times. He let that sink in, the statistical impossibility of it. She made $4 for every single dollar the average investor earned. Kennedy contextualized the scale of the victory, magnifying the accusation of cheating. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha himself? She beat him. Goldman Sachs with their billion-dollar computers and insider networks? She destroyed them. Professional fund managers with entire teams of researchers and decades of experience? Not even close. The numbers shifted, isolating a single, devastating year. In 2023 alone, Pelosi's portfolio achieved a 65% return. A contrasting chart appeared. The S&P 500's 24% return for that same year. 2.7 times, Kennedy said quietly. She made 2.7 times what the entire market delivered. Professional traders are thrilled if they beat the market by 50% over a decade. She did it consistently, year after year, beating everyone. This was the end of the argument that this was mere skill. The numbers declared it a statistical impossibility. The analysis pointed to only one remaining explanation: access. Pelosi managed to stand, her grip on the podium white-knuckled. Her voice came out steadier. Her rehearsed defense finally emerging. My husband is a skilled investor. He's been in venture capital for 40 years. He built a successful business long before I ever entered Congress. Kennedy nodded thoughtfully, as if giving the argument due consideration. Skilled, he repeated, hanging the word in the air. Let's examine that skill, shall we? The scene was set for the specific, irrefutable case studies of the catastrophic luck that benefited the Pelosi family. And the people it ruined. The luck of the draw. Deconstructing the skilled investor defense. Skilled, Kennedy repeated, allowing the word to linger, heavy with implied skepticism. Let's examine that skill, shall we? He clicked to a new slide, and his voice took on the precise, measured cadence of a prosecutor laying out a flawless timeline. This was the moment the broad statistical attack narrowed into undeniable case studies of impossible foresight. March 19, 2021, a spring morning in San Francisco. Paul Pelosi calls his broker. Kennedy painted the scene with vivid, chilling detail. He wants to buy Microsoft stock, but not regular shares, call options. Kennedy paused, emphasizing the financial instrument. These are riskier, with higher potential rewards, speculative bets, not long-term investments. He revealed the scale, $2 million worth. Strike price $130 per share. The financial instrument itself was the first sign of intent. Call options are high-stakes gambles that pay off massively only if the stock surges rapidly. This was not the move of a prudent, venture capitalist. It was the move of someone acting on a certainty. 12 days pass. Kennedy continued, letting the mere 2 weeks hang in the air. The calendar pages flip from March 19 to March 31. Another pause. March 31 arrives. Microsoft announces an Army contract, $22 billion for augmented reality headsets that soldiers will use in combat. The information was a seismic shock to the market. The stock jumps 25 points overnight. Just like that, Paul Pelosi is $2 million richer in 2 weeks. The analysis was delivered with cold finality. Maybe that's luck. Maybe he's brilliant at reading tech trends. Kennedy's tone made it clear he believed neither. Then, the focus shifted from the elite's profit to the people's ruin. Movement in the gallery drew every eye. A man, middle-aged and visibly distraught, stood, clutching a folder. His name was Robert Chen. Security officers moved forward, but Kennedy raised his hand, commanding silence. Let him speak. Chen's voice cracked, thick with the effort of fighting back tears. My name is Robert Chen. I was an investor. Small time. He swallowed hard. I followed an app, the Pelosi tracker. You know it. Kennedy nodded, allowing the man to continue. The Pelosi tracker phenomenon was the ultimate symbol of the systemic exploitation. Small investors operating under the assumption that politicians, with their privileged information, were infallible guides. It shows congressional stock trades. Chen explained, his hands trembling. I saw Paul Pelosi buying Microsoft. I thought if Nancy Pelosi's buying, it must be good. She's on committees. She knows things we don't. Chen pulled a printed portfolio statement from his folder. The paper rattling. I bought Microsoft stock the day after the Pelosi trade went public. Too late. The stock had already moved. The contract was already announced. I bought at the peak. Tears streamed down his face. But he forced the words out, detailing the specific, brutal cost of trusting a system rigged against him. Lost my son's college fund. 18 years of savings. Every birthday gift. Every Christmas bonus. Every overtime shift. Gone in one bad trade. He looked directly at Pelosi, and the raw, undeniable pain in his face was a more powerful accusation than any financial chart. My son works at Walmart now. Not UCLA like we'd planned. Not studying engineering like he dreamed about since he was 10. Walmart? Because you got rich and I got ruined. Chen collapsed back into his seat, his shoulders shaking as he wept. The room fell into a hollow, absolute quiet. The financial reporters stopped typing. This wasn't abstract market dynamics, this was a ruined American life. Kennedy's jaw visibly tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin, revealing the controlled anger beneath his professional veneer. This is why I'm here. Mr. Chen. This is who pays for her so-called skill. Real Americans losing their children's futures while she accumulates millions. Kennedy clicked to his next slide, moving forward with the systematic destruction of her defense. But perhaps Microsoft was luck. One incredibly fortunate trade. Let me tell you another story. The analysis shifted to the second, equally impossible scenario, proving the pattern was intentional, not random. The contrarian trade, the Nvidia bet and the timing conspiracy. A new timeline appeared on the screen, detailing a pattern of trading that defied all logical financial behavior, unless it was based on certainty. Summer of 2022. Kennedy began. Nancy Pelosi owns Nvidia stock, 25,000 shares. Worth about $4 million. She's also pushing legislation, the CHIPS Act, massive subsidies for semiconductor companies. She champions it publicly, passionately. This will revolutionize American industry. She tells anyone who will listen. The setup was textbook. The politician owns stock in the sector she is legislating. The perfect position to profit. But then, the inexplicable twist. Then she sells all of it. Takes a $700 loss. Selling at what appears to be the worst possible time. Why would someone sell at a loss right before their own bill passed? Why would someone take a massive hit right before the legislation they'd championed became law? The question hung, its own answer obvious. She knew something negative was coming that would briefly tank the price, allowing her to re-enter at a massive discount. She wasn't avoiding a loss, she was orchestrating one to maximize a future gain. August 9, 2022. The CHIPS Act passes. Nancy Pelosi votes yes. It's her victory. And Nvidia stock explodes. Doubles. Then doubles again. Her original stake would be worth $12 million today. She missed it all. Kennedy paused, then delivered the cold truth. Or did she? The final, calculated move appeared on the timeline, November 22, 2023, the day before Thanksgiving, when Americans are focused on family. Paul Pelosi buys $5 million in Nvidia. Not stock this time, but options, even more aggressive, even riskier. The timing was precise, designed to profit from the massive upward trajectory that followed the CHIPS Act, which she had protected. But the most damning analysis was not the trade itself, it was the cover-up. And when does he disclose this trade? December 22, 5 p.m. Friday before Christmas. Kennedy's voice hardened. When nobody is watching the news. When reporters are home with their families. When the trade will get buried in holiday coverage and year-end summaries. The disclosure timing was the smoking gun of a conspiracy to deceive. Suddenly, a young man jumped to his feet in the gallery. His face pale, his badge identifying him as congressional staff. "I filed that disclosure," he shouted, his voice shaking but resolute. Security moved toward him, but Kennedy's hand shot up. "Let him speak." The young man, later identified as Mr. Morrison, struggled to connect his phone to the projection system. An email appeared on the screen. A direct order. From Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff to me. Filed the NVIDIA options disclosure at exactly 5 p.m. on Friday, December 22. This timing is critical to minimize media exposure during the holiday period. The room erupted. Gasps became shouts. Pelosi's voice cut through the chaos. Purple with unadulterated rage. "You're fired. Security." "I already quit," Morrison shouted back, pulling a crumpled resignation letter from his pocket. "I couldn't live with myself anymore. 3 years I enabled this. 3 years of timing disclosures. 3 years of making you look clean when you weren't." His voice broke completely, his body shaking as he confessed his complicity. I thought I was helping progressive values. I thought we were fighting for the working class. I was just helping you get rich. I'm sorry to everyone you hurt." Kennedy stood, a rare gesture of respect, acknowledging the immense personal cost of this public truth. "Mr. Morrison," he said quietly, "thank you for your courage." Then he turned to Pelosi, and the disgust was unmistakable. "You didn't just trade on inside information. Congresswoman, you timed the disclosure. You buried it deliberately. That's not just unethical. That's conspiracy to deceive the American people." 3 Democratic committee members stood, gathered their papers, removed their nameplates, and walked toward the exits. They didn't speak. They simply and quietly defected. The ultimate political admission that the defense was untenable. Others watched them go, calculating their own political survival. Kennedy moved on, the pattern of corruption now confirmed by the testimony of her own staff. The visa wall. 8 years of protection for profit. Kennedy returned to his presentation, his voice maintaining the steady, methodical pace of a man who knows the evidence is inexorable. He was now detailing the longest-running, most politically protected scheme, the visa wall. 2007. Nancy Pelosi becomes Speaker of the House. Visa is terrified. Kennedy explained the context. Democrats control Congress. Credit card fees could be regulated. This could cost Visa billions in annual revenue. The protection mechanism was simple: lobbying, donations, and access. Kennedy pulled up meeting records. The Visa CEO gets a private meeting with Speaker Pelosi. Just the two of them. Nobody knows what was discussed. No notes released. Then came the payoff, the key to the entire scheme. Paul Pelosi receives an invitation. Access to pre-IPO shares. Kennedy explained the financial exclusivity. Visa is going public in the biggest IPO in history at that time, $18 billion. Pre-IPO shares are reserved for institutional investors and very special VIPs. Apparently, Paul Pelosi qualified as special. He bought somewhere between $1 million and $5 million worth. The analysis was chilling. Access was granted, and legislative protection was assured. For the next 4 years, Kennedy stated, every single bill targeting credit card fees dies. None make it to the House floor for a vote. None even get out of committee. Visa is protected. The next slide showed the stock performance. Visa doubled. Then doubled again. The Pelosis make millions while American consumers and small businesses pay the highest credit card fees in the developed world. The analysis clearly showed that the Speaker's legislative duty was subverted for personal financial gain. Kennedy fast-forwarded to recent history, proving the information stream was still active. July 23, 2024. Last year, Paul Pelosi sells $500 in Visa stock. 2 months pass. September 24. The Justice Department files a massive antitrust lawsuit against Visa for monopoly practices. 2 months. Perfect timing again. He avoided the catastrophic loss that would have followed the DOJ announcement. The human cost of this specific pattern was immediately materialized. A woman stood up in the gallery. Flowers still visible on her sleeve from work. Sarah Goldstein. I own a bakery. San Francisco. Your district. Congresswoman. Her voice trembled with controlled fury. Visa fees cost me $35 a year. Goldstein declared. That's my entire year's profit. Every penny I make after paying rent, utilities, supplies, employees, gone to Visa. She looked directly at Pelosi. The anger in her eyes unmistakable. You could have helped small businesses like mine, the backbone of your district. Instead, you protected Visa because your family was getting rich off them. She sat down, her accusation hanging heavy in the air. A moderate Democrat from Ohio. a 20-year veteran, stood up. He didn't make a speech. He said quietly but clearly, "I can't defend this anymore." He picked up his nameplate, walked to the exit, and left. 2 others followed immediately. Pelosi watched them go. The full, crushing realization setting in. She was now sitting almost completely alone at her table. Kennedy moved to his final example, reinforcing the pattern of impossible timing. December 28, 2022, end of year. Paul Pelosi sells 30.000 Google shares, about $3 million worth. January 24, 2023, less than a month later. The Justice Department sues Google for antitrust violations. He turned to face the committee members directly. 4 major trades: Microsoft, Nvidia, Visa, Google. 4 instances of impossible timing. 4 times avoiding losses or maximizing gains right before major government actions. The pattern was not anecdotal, it was statistical proof of a continuous, sophisticated stream of non-public information. The probability of fraud. Ice cream in the final indictment. Kennedy presented the scientific, undeniable evidence that the luck defense was a statistical farce. He pulled out an academic analysis, showing it to the room. A professor at MIT calculated the odds of this happening by chance. His specialty is probability theory. He's calculated odds of asteroid impacts. Kennedy delivered the conclusion with chilling certainty. He said this trading record is less likely than an asteroid hitting Earth. More likely to be struck by lightning. 34 times more likely to win the Powerball lottery than to achieve this trading record through luck alone. Kennedy's voice dropped lower, forcing the room into absolute silence. "So, Congresswoman, you have 2 options. Either your husband is the luckiest man in human history, or he's trading on information you provide. Which is it?" Pelosi's mouth opened and closed repeatedly. Gasping, desperate, unable to form words that could possibly explain what everyone had just seen. Her last remaining aide, seeing the final, inevitable collapse, whispered something urgent and then, with a gesture of defeat, gathered his papers and left. She sat completely alone at her table. Kennedy paused, then, in a masterful stroke of political theater, shifted the focus one last time, from the high crime of insider trading to the profound moral failure of her public service. "But perhaps, Congresswoman, you needed all this money. Perhaps serving the public is expensive. Perhaps you struggle financially despite your congressional salary." The sympathetic tone was a carefully set trap. He pulled out a new folder. An image appeared on screen, 2 massive, commercial-grade, stainless steel refrigerators, gleaming under professional kitchen lights. These refrigerators cost $24. Kennedy noted, his voice carefully neutral. The price of a new car. A full year of college tuition at a state university. A down payment on a house. For refrigerators. The next image showed Nancy Pelosi on television, smiling broadly, opening those refrigerators, which were packed floor to ceiling with pints of ice cream. Jenny's brand ice cream. Kennedy specified, $13 per pint. Most Americans buy ice cream for $3 or $4. Hers costs $13. He played a video clip of her on a show. Cheerful and delighted. "I don't know what I would have done if ice cream hadn't been invented." The moment was utterly carefree. A glimpse into a life of untouchable, frivolous luxury. Kennedy stopped the video and pulled out a newspaper. He read the headline aloud, 22 million Americans unemployed. Food bank lines stretch for miles. The screen split down the middle, on the left. Pelosi with her ice cream. Smiling, carefree, wealthy. On the right, Americans standing in food bank lines. Faces showing the hollow look of people who don't know how they'll feed their children. Kennedy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The final, unmasked emotional indictment. Shall we discuss, Congresswoman, what you were doing while Americans were starving?" The screen faded to black. The final, damning words appearing in stark white letters. The systematic destruction of 38 years of power was complete. The great general of the Democratic Party, who began the hearing with contempt, ended it alone, ruined by the evidence of her own greed and profound moral distance from the people she claimed to serve. The cost of her legal corruption was measured not in millions, but in the lost futures of ordinary Americans.